She died on her 18th birthday. Not slowly, not peacefully. She was dragged to the edge of the pack's sacred cliff by the very people who were supposed to protect her, and thrown off like she was nothing, like she had always been nothing. And the worst part? The boy she loved watched it happen. He stood right there, arms folded, jaw tight, eyes cold as winter stone, and he did not move. He did not speak. He did not save her. He was the one who gave the order. Her name was Imelda Voss. And the last thing she heard before the darkness swallowed her whole was his voice. Calm, final, merciless. The pack has no use for a wolfless girl. Let her fall. But here is the thing about death. Sometimes it is not the end. Sometimes it is just the beginning of something far more dangerous. If you are new here, welcome. Like the video, hit that subscribe button right now, and drop in the comments where you are watching from. People are tuning in from all over the world for stories like this, and you do not want to miss what happens next. Imelda Voss was born in the Ashvale Pack on a night when the moon turned red. The elders said it was a bad sign. They whispered about it for years, how the blood moon appeared the exact moment Imelda drew her first breath, how the wolves in the forest went silent for a full 3 minutes before she cried. They said nature itself had paused. Her mother, Petra Voss, never told her any of this. Petra was a quiet woman with deep-set eyes and hands that were always cold, always working, always trying to make herself invisible inside a pack that barely tolerated her. She was an Omega, the lowest rank a wolf could carry. And Imelda, born from her blood, inherited that label before she could even walk. Omega. The word followed Imelda everywhere. It sat in the way older pack members spoke to her, in the way they looked through her at pack gatherings, in the way the other children refused to sit beside her at meals, as if poverty and weakness were something you could catch like a disease. She grew up scrubbing floors in the pack house. She grew up carrying laundry baskets bigger than her small body, hauling firewood in winter with cracked, bleeding hands, learning to move through rooms without making a sound so nobody would find a reason to scold her. She was invisible, and she told herself that was fine, because she had one thing that made it bearable. She had Corvus Hale. Corvus was the beta's son. Tall even at 15, with dark hair that curled slightly at his temples and gray eyes the color of fog over still water. He was not like the other pack boys. He did not mock her. He did not look through her. He actually looked at her. The first time was when Imelda was 12 years old, and she had dropped a tray of food in the middle of the pack dining hall. Plates crashed. Soup spread across the stone floor. Every head turned. Every set of eyes on her was like a hot brand pressed to her skin. She knelt down immediately, shaking, starting to gather the broken pieces with trembling hands. And then another pair of hands appeared beside hers. She looked up. Corvus Hale was crouching next to her, picking up a broken dish, completely unbothered by the fact that everyone was watching. "I'll help," he said simply. That was it. No grand speech. No dramatic declaration. Just 2 words and 2 hands helping her clean a mess she had made. But for Imelda Voss, it was the whole world. They became something after that. Not officially. You did not get to have official things when you were an Omega, but they had their own version of it. Quiet conversations behind the grain storage house. Walks along the eastern creek where the water ran shallow and cold. Books that Corvus would bring her from his father's library because she had mentioned, once, that she wanted to read more. He remembered. He always remembered the things she said. By the time they were 16, Imelda knew she was in love with him. She did not say it. She buried it deep, packed it down beneath all the practical thoughts about survival and duty and knowing your place. Because she was not stupid. She knew what she was. She knew what he was. The gap between an Omega girl and a Beta's son was not just social. It was written into the very bones of pack law. But she loved him anyway. And she believed, with the stupid, stubborn hope that only the young carry, that he loved her too. She had reasons to believe it. The way he would always find her at pack gatherings, drifting toward her like a tide. The way he laughed differently when she was around. Lighter, more real. The way he had once, just once, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and left his hand against her cheek for 3 full seconds before he pulled it back like he had touched something he was not supposed to touch. She held that moment for years. She replayed it on cold nights when the wind came under the door of her small room and the loneliness sat on her chest like a stone. She told herself it meant something. She told herself that the moon would grant her a wolf on her 18th birthday like it granted every other pack member, and that when her wolf came, everything would change. She would have power. She would have standing. She would not be invisible anymore. The mate bond could activate then, and if the moon was kind, maybe it would lead her straight to Corvus. She counted down the days. She planned nothing and hoped for everything. And on the morning of her 18th birthday, she woke before dawn and stood outside in the damp grass and lifted her face to the sky and waited. She waited for the pull in her chest, the heat in her blood, the magnificent pain of a wolf forcing its way to the surface. She waited, and nothing came. By mid-morning, the pack knew. By afternoon, the whispers had grown into open talk, and the open talk had a sharp edge to it that cut different from anything Imelda had felt before. Wolfless. The word moved through the pack like a virus. Wolfless meant you were not really a wolf at all. You were a body wearing the skin of one. You could not shift. You could not run with the pack under the moon. You could not protect territory or contribute to battles or pass power to your children. You were, by pack law and pack tradition, completely useless. More than useless. You were a liability. Imelda stood in the pack courtyard that afternoon while the alphas circle gathered around her. She kept her spine straight. She kept her eyes forward. She did not let them see her shake. But she was shaking. Alpha Dreyastale, Corvus's father, was a massive man with a voice like rolling gravel. He did not waste time. He looked at Imelda the way you look at a cracked wall that needs to come down. The pack has 30 days to decide your fate, he said. If no wolf comes before the next full moon, the law is clear. Imelda knew the law. Exile. Or worse. She nodded because there was nothing else to do. She walked back to her room. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed. She pressed her hands flat against her knees to stop them from trembling and stared at the wall until the light outside the window went from gold to gray to black. And then she heard the knock. 3 soft taps against her door. She knew the rhythm. She always knew his rhythm. Come in, she said. Corvus Hale stepped inside. He had to duck slightly to clear the low door frame. He was 18 now, nearly a man, and the fog-colored eyes that had always been careful and kind were something else tonight. She could not read them. That scared her more than the alpha's words. I heard, he said. Everyone heard, she replied. He moved to stand in the center of the room. He did not sit. He stayed on his feet in a way that felt deliberate, like he was preparing to leave in a hurry. Imelda. His voice was low. Careful. The way you speak to someone when you are about to say something that cannot be unsaid. She felt cold. Just say it, she told him. He looked at the floor for one moment. Then he looked at her. My father has already begun the negotiations, he said. There is a girl from the Stonecroft pack. A beta's daughter. A strong wolf. He wants the alliance. Imelda heard every word clearly. She heard the ones he did not say, too. And you? She asked. What do you want? A long silence. The kind that stretches like skin being pulled too tight. I want what is best for the pack, he said. She had thought she was braced for it. She was not. It was like being split open from the inside. A slow, soundless tearing that left no visible wound, but went all the way down to the center of her. Okay, she said. Imelda. I said okay, Corvus. He stood there for another moment. His jaw worked like he had more words caught behind his teeth. But then he left, and she understood, in that silence after the door closed, that the boy she had loved for 6 years had just chosen everything over her. The pack, the alliance, his future, his father's approval, everything, except her. She did not sleep that night. She did not eat the next morning. She spent the following 3 weeks living in a strange kind of fog, moving through her duties, speaking when spoken to, shrinking herself down to near nothing, so she would not draw more attention than she already had. She tried, quietly, desperately, to will her wolf into existence. She stood in the forest at midnight with her arms outstretched and begged whatever lived inside the moon to give her something. Anything. A flicker, a trace, a single growl from somewhere inside her chest. The forest was silent. The moon offered nothing. On the 29th day, Alpha Dreist called a pack gathering. Imelda stood in the center of the circle. Around her, the entire Ashvale pack formed a ring. 200 faces. Some watching with pity, some with contempt, some with the flat, removed expression of people watching a verdict be handed down for someone they did not consider quite real. Corvus stood with his father. He did not look at her. She looked at him. She could not help it. Even now, even after everything, she looked at him like she was memorizing him. Like some part of her, the most foolish, most unbreakable part, still believed he was going to step forward. Alpha Dreist's voice filled the clearing. Imelda Voss, you have passed your 18th year without a wolf. You have shown no sign of the shift. By the ancient law of the Ashvale pack, you are hereby. Wait. The voice came from the outer edge of the circle. Everyone turned. An old woman walked forward through the gap that formed automatically around her. She was not from Ashvale. Imelda had never seen her before. She was small and deeply weathered, with white hair braided down her back and eyes that were not quite the right color. Too pale, almost silver, catching the torchlight the way a mirror catches the sun. Nobody stopped her. Nobody spoke. The Alpha's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Someone who has been watching this pack for a long time, the old woman said. Her voice was steady and unhurried. And someone who knows what that girl is. Every eye swung back to Imelda. The old woman looked at her directly. Those silver eyes were calm and completely certain. She is not wolfless, the woman said. She is something older than a wolf. Something this pack does not have the bloodline to recognize. Alpha Dreist's jaw tightened. This gathering is not open to outsiders. I suggest. Her wolf is not missing, the woman continued, ignoring him completely. It is locked. Sealed by an old binding put on her mother's line 3 generations ago. The binding was set to break at 21. She paused. You have sentenced a girl for a condition she did not choose and cannot control. And you will regret it. The clearing went very quiet. Alpha Dreist looked at Corvus. Something passed between them. Fast, invisible, decisive. And then Corvus spoke. He stepped forward and his voice was clear and hard and final. The law does not account for bindings or old blood, he said. The pack's safety comes first. Imelda Voss, you are hereby rejected by the Ashvale pack. You will be escorted to the northern border before sunrise. Imelda felt the words land. Rejection was not just a social concept in wolf culture. It was a severing. When a pack alpha or beta declared formal rejection, it cut something energetic and real, some invisible thread that connected a born wolf to their pack, to the land, to the collective strength of the group. For a full wolf, rejection hurt like losing a limb. For a wolfless girl with a sealed bloodline, nobody knew what it would do. She found out quickly. It felt like fire running down the center of her spine. She gasped. Her knees buckled. She caught herself before she fell, gripping her own arms, pressing her nails into her skin to anchor herself against the wave of pure, burning agony that rolled through her from scalp to soul. She heard the old woman make a sharp sound, not fear, more like fury. She heard Alpha Dreas say something else, but the words were underwater now, warped and far away. She heard her own breathing, ragged, fast, thinning. And then she heard Corvus again, closer now, right in front of her. She looked up at him through the pain. His gray eyes were looking at her. Finally he was looking at her. But it was wrong. The look was wrong. It was not grief. It was not guilt. It was not even the blank cruelty of someone who had simply chosen power over love. It was something colder than all of that. It was relief. He was relieved. He was glad this was happening. She understood, in that moment, that he had never loved her. Not the way she had loved him. What she had mistaken for love was something far simpler and far more painful. She had been convenient. Safe. A girl too low in rank to threaten him. Too devoted to leave. Too in love to ask hard questions. She had been warmth when he needed warmth and gone when he needed to be gone. She had been nothing. She almost laughed. She would have, if breathing had not become such a complicated project. She felt herself being guided, or pushed, she could not tell which, toward the edge of the clearing. 2 pack enforcers on either side of her, hands tied on her arms. She looked back once. The old woman was watching her, and mouthing something. Imelda could not hear it over the roaring in her ears. But she read the shape of the words. Hold on. She did not get the chance. They took her to the northern cliff before sunrise. Not the border, but the cliff. And she understood then that Corvus had lied. There was no exile. The Ashvale Pact did not exile their failures. They erased them. The drop was 300 feet. She did not have a wolf to survive it. She had nothing. She stood at the edge and looked down at the dark rocks below, barely visible in the pre-dawn gray, and she thought about her mother. She thought about Corvus's hands picking up broken dishes beside her on a dining hall floor. She thought about the old woman's silver eyes. She thought about that one moment, his hand against her cheek, 3 full seconds, and how she had built a whole cathedral of hope out of nothing but 3 seconds. She thought, I deserved better than all of this. And then the hands behind her pushed. And she fell. The darkness that caught her was not the darkness of death. It was warmer than that. Softer. Like being held underwater in a pool that was exactly body temperature, suspended, weightless, without urgency. She was not aware of time passing because time did not seem to pass. There was just the dark and the warmth. And somewhere far below the surface of all that stillness, a sound. A heartbeat. Not hers. Slower. Deeper. Ancient in a way she could not describe, like the heartbeat of a mountain, or the sea, or something that had been alive long before wolves or humans or pack law had ever existed. She drifted toward it. And then a voice. Not the old woman. Different. Lower. The kind of voice that came from a chest that had never once been afraid. Not yet, it said. She did not know if it was speaking to her or about her. Then, you are not finished. And the darkness began to reverse. The warmth receded. The heartbeat faded. And Imelda Voss drew a breath so violent and so sudden that it physically threw her upright, lungs seizing, body arching, hands slamming flat against a cold stone floor she could not see because every light in the world had gone out, and then come crashing back simultaneously. She screamed, not from fear, from pain, from cold, from the raw, overwhelming sensation of being alive in a body that had just been unmade and remade at the cellular level. She screamed until she was empty. Then she collapsed forward and pressed her forehead to the stone and breathed. Just breathed. In, out, in, out. When she finally raised her head, She saw the old woman sitting 3 feet away from her on a low wooden stool, watching her with those silver eyes that held no surprise whatsoever. "You survived," the woman said. Not relief, not celebration, just the calm observation of someone checking an expected outcome off a list. "Where am I?" Imelda's voice came out wrecked, scraped and raw. "My house. In the Meyerwood." The old woman tilted her head slightly. "I caught you." Imelda stared at her. "You caught me. I fell 300 feet. I know." "How?" "Old tricks," the woman said simply. "The same kind your grandmother once used before she agreed to have her bloodline sealed." A long silence. Imelda sat up fully. She was wearing different clothes. She had not noticed until now. Clean, dark, fitted, unlike anything she had owned in Ashvale. Her body felt different too, heavier and lighter at the same time. Like every bone had been replaced with something denser and more solid. Like her skin was more awake than it had ever been, registering the slight movement of air in the room as clearly as if it were wind. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Ren Aldrich," the old woman said. "I was your grandmother Sepha's closest friend, and I have been watching over you since the day you were born, waiting for the binding to break." The binding, the seal on your bloodline, placed 3 generations ago by a Lycan elder who feared what your grandmother's line might produce. Ren's pale eyes were steady and serious. They were right to fear it. Imelda felt something shift in her chest. Not pain this time. Something different. Something that uncoiled slowly, like a rope being released from a post that had held it too long. "What am I?" she asked. Ren looked at her for a long moment. "A Lycan vessel," she said. "Born once in every several generations. Chosen by the old bloodline to carry a power that regular pack wolves cannot hold. Your wolf is not a wolf at all. It is something much older, much stronger. And it has been trapped inside you since you were born, waiting." Imelda's mouth was dry. "Waiting for what?" "For the seal to break," Ren said. "And for your 18th year to close." "My 18th year is over," Imelda said. "I died." "Yes," Ren agreed, without blinking. "That is what broke the seal completely. Death was the final key. Your grandmother's binding was crafted that way on purpose. She feared you would be exploited before you were ready. So she built in a fail-safe. Only a death endured in unjust circumstances could unlock the full inheritance." Imelda sat with that for a moment. Her grandmother had planned for her to die. Her grandmother had loved her enough to plan for her death so that she could come back stronger. She did not know whether to feel grateful or devastated. She felt both. "What happens now?" she said. Ren's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile. More like the look of someone who has been patient for a very, very long time and can finally see the end of that patience arriving. "Now," Ren said, "your wolf wakes up." It happened that night. Imelda stood in the Meyerwood alone, because Ren had been specific. No one should witness the first shift of a Lycan vessel. Not because it was shameful, but because it was sacred, and what is sacred should not be observed by anyone who has not earned the right. The forest around her was old. Not just old in the way forests are old in a way that felt deliberate. The trees were enormous, dark, wide enough that 3 people could not have joined hands around their trunks. The ground was soft and layered with decades of fallen leaves. The air smelled of deep water and something mineral and clean. Imelda stood in a small clearing in the center of all that oldness, and she let herself be still. She stopped trying to force anything. She stopped holding herself together, which she had been doing, she realized, for her entire life. Bracing, always preparing for the next blow, never fully exhaling, never fully landing in her own skin. She just exhaled, and the thing inside her responded instantly. It had been waiting. It had been patient, but it had never for 1 second been absent. The heat started in her sternum, not the burning rejection pain, something entirely different. This was alive and purposeful, like something made of pure intention. It moved outward from her center in waves, traveling down her arms to her fingertips, up her spine to the base of her skull, down to her heels. She felt her bones shift. She had heard that shifting hurt. Other wolves described it as agony the first time. Bones breaking and remaking themselves, muscles tearing and reforming, the body unmade and rebuilt in seconds. For Imelda, it was not agony. It was loud and overwhelming and enormous and absolutely not gentle. But it was not pain. It was more like remembering. Like a language coming back to you that you spoke fluently as a child and forgot when you moved somewhere new. Your mouth still knows the shapes of the words. Your tongue still knows the sounds. It just needed a reason to try again. She shifted. She stood in the clearing on four paws that were nothing like a wolf's paws. Larger, more articulated, the claws longer and darker and shimmering faintly silver in the moonlight. And she raised her head, and she breathed in the entire forest in one long inhale. Everything. She could smell everything. The individual scents of dozens of tree species. The blood of a rabbit half a mile east. The old wood smoke drifting from Wren's cottage. The cold mineral tang of the stream. The distant, chemical smell of the Ashvale Pack's territory. Their border markers, their individual wolves, all of it cataloged and recognized in the space of a single breath. She could smell Corvus hail. The scent was familiar, and it meant absolutely nothing to her now. She released it like smoke. She ran. She ran through the Mirewood for 3 hours, relearning what her body could do. She was faster than any wolf she had ever seen. Not just faster in the way of healthy versus sick, but faster in a different category entirely. The way a hawk is not just a faster sparrow, but a different kind of creature. She could move through the trees without making a sound. She could change direction at full speed with no loss of momentum. She could see in complete darkness as though it were noon. When she finally stopped and shifted back, she was standing at the edge of the Mirewood where the trees thinned and the open land stretched away toward the distant lights of the nearest city. She stood there breathing, human-shaped again, bare feet in the cold earth. She thought about everything she had lost. Her mother. She did not know where Petra Voss was. Whether they had punished her when Imelda died. Whether she was alive. She thought about 6 years of love she had given to a boy who had been relieved to watch her fall. She thought about 200 people who had stood in a circle and watched it happen. She did not feel grief anymore. She felt something much cleaner. Clarity. A door she had not known was closed had opened, and on the other side of it was a version of herself she had never been allowed to meet. The Imelda Voss who walked back to Wren's cottage that night was not the girl who had died on the cliff. She was someone else entirely. She was just getting started. 3 years passed. Wren Aldrich was many things. Keeper of old knowledge, practitioner of what most modern packs had dismissed as superstition, reader of bloodlines and their hidden codes. But what she turned out to be, most essentially, was the most thorough and demanding teacher Imelda had ever encountered. She taught Imelda to control the shift, not just trigger it, but direct it, hold it, stop it mid-transformation if needed. She taught her to fight in both forms, to read terrain, to track without scent. She taught her the history of Lycan vessels going back centuries, what they were, what they could do, what had happened to the ones who were found before they were ready. She taught Imelda the old language of the bloodline, and with it came access to knowledge that lived in the marrow rather than the mind. Inherited memory, genetic wisdom, the accumulated experience of every vessel who had come before her. She taught Imelda how to hide, not out of cowardice, out of strategy. A weapon you revealed too early, Wren said once, not looking up from the map she was drawing. is a weapon that gets disarmed. Imelda took that lesson and wore it like a second skin. She practiced being ordinary. She practiced being overlooked. She practiced entering a room and not taking up space, not triggering the instinctive animal awareness that strong wolves activated in others. She could walk through a crowd of pack wolves and none of them would feel her power. They would see an unremarkable young woman with steady eyes and slightly calloused hands and nothing notable about her at all. She was very, very good at hiding. She was also, over those 3 years, building something. Contacts. Information. A network of outcasts and rogues and wolves who had been thrown away by packs that did not deserve them. People who had their own reasons to want the old order disrupted. She did not recruit them openly. She let them come to her as word traveled through the underground channels that run beneath every wolf society. The channels that the alphas and betas pretend do not exist. She learned about the Lycan king. His name was Roderick Vale. Not an alpha. Something above an alpha. A Lycan in the truest, oldest sense of the word. The last of a line that went back to the original wolves. The ones who had existed before pack law, and before territory borders, and before all the complicated social structures that modern wolf society had built to manage what was, at its core, a population of apex predators trying to live together without killing each other. Roderick Vale was the highest authority in the wolf world. He was also, by most accounts, a man who had not left his mountain stronghold in 11 years. The stories about him were contradictory. Some said he was ancient, hundreds of years old, kept alive by the Lycan power running through his bloodline. Some said he was young but damaged, broken by a tragedy that had made him withdraw from the world. Some said he was cruel. Some said he was just. Some said he was searching for something. Ren knew more than she said, which was typical of Ren. When Imelda asked directly, Ren looked at her for a long moment before answering. He is searching for a vessel, Ren said. Why? Because a Lycan king without a vessel is a fire without fuel, Ren said. The old bloodlines were always paired. The king's power and the vessel's power are two halves of the same thing. Alone, each is formidable. Together, she paused. Together they are what the earliest wolf histories describe as the original state of the world. Imelda sat with that. And if he finds one, she asked, what does he do with her? That, Ren said, depends entirely on who he is. It was not the answer Imelda wanted. But Ren rarely gave the answers Imelda wanted. She had learned to work with the answers Ren gave. In the 3rd year, the thing she had been waiting for finally moved. She received word, through her network, through 3 intermediaries, each of whom knew only a piece, that the Ashvale pack was in trouble. Alpha Dreist Hale was dying. The pack was fracturing. Corvus was fighting to hold the beta position he had inherited, but there was a challenger, a brutal, ambitious wolf named Hector Grain, who had come from the outside and embedded himself in the pack's power structure with the patience and precision of someone who had been planning it for years. Grain wanted to absorb the Ashvale pack into his own rogue coalition. He wanted their territory. He wanted their resources. He wanted to tear down what Dreist had built and replace it with something that served Grain alone. The pack that had thrown Imelda away was about to be devoured. She received this information and she sat with it for 3 full days. Ren did not ask her what she was thinking. Ren knew. On the 4th morning, Imelda came to the kitchen where Ren was sitting with her tea and said simply, "It is time." Ren looked at her. "Which part?" Ren asked. "All of it," Imelda said. Ren set down her cup. And for the first time in all the years Imelda had known her, she smiled. Not a small or restrained thing. A real smile. Full and complicated and proud in the way that only comes from having watched someone grow from the ground up. "Then we go north first," Ren said. "Before Ashvale. There is someone you need to meet." The road to Roderick Vale's mountain stronghold took 11 days on foot through terrain that was designed to discourage the uncommitted. The mountains in the Northern Territory were old and volcanic, with passes that closed without warning and trails that doubled back on themselves in patterns that seemed random until you understood they were a test, a labyrinth built into the landscape by someone who wanted to make sure only the right kinds of people arrived at the end. Imelda moved through them without difficulty, not because she was immune to the difficulty. The cold was real, the misdirections were irritating, the elevation made her lungs work harder than she was accustomed to. But she had spent 3 years being trained by a woman who believed that hardship was information, not punishment, and she had learned to read difficulty the way a sailor reads weather. She arrived at the stronghold on the 11th evening, just as the sun dropped behind the mountain's western shoulder and the sky went the deep, bruised purple-blue of high-altitude dusk. The stronghold was not what she expected. She had imagined something imposing, severe, a fortress built to project power. What she found was more like a compound that had grown organically over generations. Stone buildings fitted together with obvious age and repair, modifications added in different eras, so the whole thing looked like a record of time rather than a declaration of dominance. There were trees growing inside the outer wall. Gardens. A forge whose chimney was smoking gently. It looked, she thought, like a place where someone actually lived. The guards at the outer gate were professional and quiet. They did not challenge her the way she expected. They simply looked at her with an attentiveness that told her they were not ordinary wolves. Ren Aldrich sends her regards, Imelda said to the one nearest her. And I would like to speak with Roderick Vale. The guard's eyes flickered. He will want to know your name, the guard said. Imelda Voss, she said. Tell him I am the vessel he has been looking for, and that I am not here to be found. I am here to negotiate. They made her wait. She expected that. She sat in a stone anteroom for 2 hours with nothing but a fire and the awareness of being assessed from multiple directions by multiple wolves she could not see but could feel the way you feel eyes on the back of your neck. She let them assess. She kept her energy completely controlled. No display of power. No visible impatience. She sat with her hands in her lap and her back straight, and her face the pleasant, unremarkable mask she had spent 3 years perfecting, and she let them see exactly what she wanted them to see. Nothing threatening, nothing frightened, just a woman who was certain she was in the right place. The door at the far end of the anteroom opened. A man walked in. She had expected old. She had expected something physically overwhelming. The legends of the Lycan king always described him in terms that edged toward mythology, a figure more symbol than human. Roderick Vale was neither old nor mythological. He was somewhere in what looked like his early 30s, though she knew better than to trust the appearance of Lycan bloodlines. He was not as tall as she had imagined, taller than average, but not the giant the stories implied. Dark-skinned, with a lean, deliberately held body and eyes that were the specific dark amber of ancient honey. Not warm, exactly, but deep. The kind of color that made you look twice because it seemed to change slightly depending on the light. He was not wearing anything that announced his rank. No crown, no ceremonial clothing. He was dressed practically in dark colors, and he moved the way very powerful things moved when they were not trying to be impressive, which was to say, impressively, regardless. He sat across from her. He did not speak immediately. She did not either. They assessed each other in silence for a full 30 seconds, which was longer than most silences in conversation and exactly long enough to tell her several things about him. He was not theatrical. He was not posturing. He was genuinely taking stock. She respected it. You survived a pack rejection and a 300-foot fall, he said. His voice was level and quieter than she expected. And then you spent 3 years building a network of outcasts in the Southern Territories. You knew about me, she said. Ren has been sending me reports since you were 3 years old, he said. Something cold moved through her chest. Since I was 3. Yes. She breathed steadily. And you never intervened. Ren's instructions were specific, he said. The binding had to break in its own time. Intervention would have disrupted the process. The process. She let that sit. A girl was thrown off a cliff. Yes, he said. He did not look away. And I am aware of what that means. I am not asking you to be grateful for it. She studied him. What are you asking? Nothing, he said, which surprised her. I am listening. You said you came to negotiate. I would like to hear what you have to offer and what you want in return. She almost smiled. She had prepared for resistance. She had prepared to prove herself, to demonstrate, to fight for a seat at the table. He had simply pulled out the chair. She recalibrated. The Ashvale pack, she said. Hector Grain is moving against them. In 6 weeks, maybe less, he will have enough coalition backing to make his move openly. And when he does, the Ashvale territory falls. That territory sits on top of the largest underground water system in the southern Wolflands. Whoever controls it controls the water supply for 11 packs. Roderick was listening in that particular way of his, completely still, completely attentive. Grain does not want to govern it, Imelda continued. He wants to leverage it, to sell access, to build a debt network that puts him above pack law. If he succeeds, the balance shifts permanently, Roderick said. Yes. You want to stop him, he said. I want to stop him, she confirmed. And then I want the Ashvale pack dissolved, and its people given the right to choose their own pack affiliations without penalty. No forced absorptions. No prisoners. And in return, she met those amber eyes directly. I will stand with you, she said. As vessel. Fully. No conditions, no half measures. Whatever the paired bloodlines are meant to do together, I am offering that. A silence. The fire between them shifted, catching a new angle on the wood, throwing a momentary flare of gold across his face. You are offering something very significant, he said slowly, for the sake of people who threw you off a cliff. I am not doing it for them, she said. I am doing it because Grain's water leverage will eventually reach everyone, including people who had nothing to do with what happened to me. And because, she paused, choosing her next words with precision, because I am not interested in being a woman who lets innocent people suffer, because I want the guilty ones to feel it first. Another silence. Longer. He looked at her the way she imagined a navigator looks at a star they have been using for years when they finally see it up close. Like recognition. Like the satisfying, almost unsettling experience of something fitting exactly where it was always supposed to fit. The pack your wolf inherited, he said quietly. It is not what the Ashvale pack stories described, is it? No, she said. Can I see it? She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded. She let the seal down, the careful, practiced containment she wore in populated spaces, the neutralizing frequency she had learned to maintain. She let her actual nature surface, not the shift itself, just the energetic reality of what she was. She watched his face. He did not flinch, but his eyes changed, the amber deepened, and something in the quality of his attention shifted from assessment to something that was older and more instinctive and significantly more complicated. 3 generations under a binding, he said, very quietly, more to himself than to her. Yes, she said. You must have been in agony, he said. All those years. Not knowing. Feeling the pressure of it with no context for what it was. She had not expected that. The pragmatic acknowledgement of her losses, yes. The tactical recognition of her value, yes. She had prepared for both. She had not prepared for him to reach across all the calculation and the careful negotiation and say something that was just. Human. True. She kept her face steady. I managed, she said. I know you did, he said. That is not in question. He stood. He extended his hand across the space between them. Not a handshake in the conventional sense, more deliberate than that. Palm up, offered rather than demanded. We will take the Ashvale territory together, he said. And then we will talk about what comes next. Slowly. With no assumptions and no obligations beyond what we explicitly agree to. She looked at his hand. She thought about a boy on a cliff who had felt nothing. She thought about 3 years of building herself from the wreckage someone else had made of her. She thought, I am not the same girl who loved the wrong person and paid for it with her life. I know how to read people now. And this one is not Corvus Hale. She placed her hand in Roderick Vale's and felt the contact like a key turning in a lock that went down to a very deep, very old place inside her. He felt it too. She could tell. Neither of them said anything about it. Agreed, she said. And the negotiation became something else entirely. Something neither of them had planned for, and both of them, perhaps, had needed more than they knew. They moved on the Ashvale territory 2 weeks later. Imelda had spent those 2 weeks doing 3 things simultaneously. The first was working with Roderick's strategists to map the approach. Not a military assault. That would have been crude and would have destroyed the very infrastructure Grain was trying to exploit. What they needed was a surgical removal. Grain and his inner circle extracted cleanly, his coalition fractured at its seams, his leverage dismantled before it could be deployed. The second was locating her mother. She found Petra Voss living with a small group of Omega wolves 3 miles outside the Ashvale border. Expelled, not killed, which was the one grace note in the whole brutal composition of what the pack had done. Petra was thin and quieter than Imelda remembered, with new gray in her hair and eyes that had developed the careful, watchful quality of someone who had learned not to trust comfort. Their reunion was not dramatic. It was a small room and 2 people who had survived things they were not supposed to survive, sitting across from each other and trying to remember how to be in the same space again. They told me you died, Petra said. I did, Imelda said. And then I didn't. Petra looked at her, really looked at her, and her eyes went to something very specific in Imelda's face. Something that had not been there before. Something that belonged to another generation. Cepha, she whispered. Yes, Imelda said softly. I think so. Petra reached across the small table and took Imelda's hands in both of hers. She would have been so proud, Petra said. That was all it took. Imelda, who had not cried in 3 years, who had been too busy surviving and then too busy building to have time for grief, cried for exactly 4 minutes in her mother's kitchen. Then she wiped her face, straightened her spine, and told Petra everything. And Petra, who had spent 18 years trying to keep her daughter invisible and safe from a world that treated their bloodline like a liability, listened with her hands folded and her eyes bright, and a look on her face that was nothing but fierce, quiet, burning pride. The third thing Imelda did in those 2 weeks was something she had not planned and could not have predicted. She spent time with Roderick Vale. Not strategizing, not negotiating, just being in proximity to someone who treated her as though she had always been exactly what she was. As though there was nothing surprising or provisional about her. As though her power was not a fact to be managed, but simply a feature of who she was. The way someone's height is simply a feature of who they are. He was not soft. He was not sentimental. He had the particular emotional directness of someone who had spent too many years alone to bother with social performance. He said what he meant, heard what was said to him, and did not fill silence with noise. She found it, unexpectedly, restful. After years of calculating every word, every expression, every micro-adjustment to make herself acceptable, here was someone she did not have to perform for. He noticed things. He noticed when she had not slept enough. He noticed when something she said was the polished surface version and not the actual thought underneath. He did not push. He just noticeably noticed, in a way that made her feel that nothing she actually was would be unwelcome. She did not know what to do with that. She decided, for the moment, not to do anything with it. She had enough to manage. On the day they moved on Ashvale, Imelda did not ride in with a declaration. She walked. She walked through the eastern border of the Ashvale territory in her human form, alone, at noon, in plain sight of the border patrol, and she let them see her face. It took the patrol 3 seconds to recognize her. Then pandemonium. She had expected that too. She was detained. Of course she was detained. She was supposed to be dead, and brought to the pack house, which was both exactly as she remembered it and deeply, strangely smaller than she remembered. The ceilings she had always thought of as high were just normal ceilings. The rooms that had loomed large in her memory of powerlessness were just rooms. It is remarkable, she thought. What changes when you are no longer afraid? They brought her to Corvus. He was in his father's old chair. Dreist had died 6 weeks ago. The transition to Beta Prime had not been kind to him. He looked thinner, tighter, the fog-gray eyes sharper with stress, and something she recognized as the specific strain of a man trying to hold a position he is not certain he deserves. He stared at her. She waited. "You are dead," he said. "Apparently not," she said. "How?" "That is not the most important question right now," she said. She moved to the chair across from his and sat. "Not asked." Saturday. The way someone sits in a room they own. "The most important question is what you are going to do about Hector Grain." His jaw tightened. "That is a pack matter. And the pack is about to not exist," she said. "Because Grain has been infiltrating your southern flank for 18 months and your senior enforcers have not flagged it because 3 of them are already on his payroll." Silence. "How do you know that?" he asked. "I have been building toward this moment for 3 years," she said. "I know everything, Corvus. I know about the Grain's water leverage plan. I know about your 3 compromised enforcers. I know about the debt your father took on in his last year that Grain has now called in. I know where your pack's vulnerabilities are to the inch." His face had gone through several colors. He settled on something that looked, she thought, a bit like shame. "Why are you here?" he asked. "We threw you off a cliff." "Yes," she said. "And you're what?" "Here to watch it fall." She looked at him steadily. This was the moment she had imagined. She had imagined it many times over 3 years, in many different versions. In some of them, she was merciless. In some of them, she was coldly triumphant. In some of them, she gave a speech that dismantled him piece by piece. What she felt now, sitting across from him, was much quieter than any of those versions. She just felt done. Done with hating him. Done with wanting him to feel it. Done with giving him any more of her energy than this single afternoon required. "I am here," she said, "because there are 400 people in this pack, and most of them are not you. They are not your father. They are not the ones who made the decision to throw me off a cliff. They are people who were born here and raised here and have nowhere else to go. And they do not deserve to be absorbed into Grain's coalition because the men who led them were weak and cruel and afraid." He looked at her for a long moment. "What are you asking me to do?" he said. "Stand aside," she said. "Let someone more capable of protecting these people manage this situation. And then, when it is over, be honest with yourself and with anyone who asks about what you did and why. You want me to confess. I want you to stop pretending," she said. "It's exhausting to be around, and it accomplishes nothing." A silence. "I was afraid of you," he said quietly. "That night. I didn't understand what you were, but I felt it. I think I had always felt it. And he stopped. "You chose comfort over honesty," she said. "Yes. And you chose your father's approval over what you knew was right." "Yes. And someone died for it." Almost. Yes, he said. His voice was very quiet now. I know. She stood. Roderick Vale will move on the Grain Coalition tonight, she said. Your cooperation will make it faster and cleaner. Brief your enforcers, the loyal ones, and stand your wolves down so they do not engage. When it is over, the Lycan King will address the pack directly. She walked toward the door. Imelda. She paused. He started. She turned enough to look at him over her shoulder. I know, she said. And I am not interested in your apology. I am interested in whether you will do the right thing tonight. She met his eyes. For once. She left. The operation to dismantle Hector Grain's coalition took 3 hours and 22 minutes. Roderick's people were exceptional. They moved through the Ashvale territory in coordinated groups, extracting Grain's embedded enforcers from their positions simultaneously so none could warn the others, cutting Grain's communication lines before he knew they were cut, surrounding his inner circle at the supply house, where he had been staging resources for his move. Grain himself was brought to the center of the pack's main courtyard just before midnight. He was a large man, the kind of large that came from genuine physical power rather than ceremony. He had the look of someone who was accustomed to intimidating rooms simply by entering them. He was not, she thought, a coward. He was something more dangerous than a coward. He was competent in service of the wrong things. He looked at the circle of Roderick's people surrounding him. He looked at Roderick. And then his gaze moved and found Imelda, standing to Roderick's right, and something in his expression, the careful, calculating surface, shifted just slightly. He had heard the stories too. He had not believed them. She watched him adjust to believing them now. You do not have the authority for this under current pack law, Grain said to Roderick. His voice was controlled. An intervention in a single pack's territory requires. I am not intervening in a single pack's territory, Roderick said. I am intervening in an attempt to seize control of the southern water system, which falls under Lycan jurisdiction as a shared resource. He paused. Your plan was well researched, Grain. Thorough. You understood the leverage. You simply underestimated who was paying attention. Grain's eyes slid to Imelda again. The vessel, he said. The vessel, she confirmed. The bloodline the Ashvale pack threw away, he said. There was something that might have been dark appreciation in his voice. The one thing that could bring the Lycan King to this territory. And they handed it to you. He almost laughed. Beautiful. It was quite a gift, she agreed. I try to be grateful. His eyes stayed on her, calculating still, never quite stopping. The water system leverage was going to be used for coalition building, he said, not personal enrichment. The southern packs need a unified voice at the Lycan table. Vale has ignored the South for a decade. You are not wrong about the need, Roderick said. You are wrong about the method. Peaceful requests were ignored. Peaceful requests were not made, Roderick said, with the particular flatness of someone citing a fact they find genuinely disappointing. I received no formal petition from the Southern Packs in the last 11 years. I received one unofficial communication 3 years ago that I responded to within a week. The response was not acknowledged. A silence. Grain looked at him. Imelda watched Grain recalculate. She had seen it before in her years of building networks. The moment when someone whose entire worldview is built on a specific grievance is confronted with the possibility that the grievance, while real, rested on incomplete information. It was not a comfortable moment to watch. I will stand trial under Lycan law, Grain said finally. Yes, Roderick agreed. You will. And the Southern Pac's concerns will be heard? Roderick looked at him steadily. I give you my word. Which, for the record, is more than you were offering anyone. Grain said nothing more. He was taken. What came next was slower. Roderick met with the Ashvale pack in the main courtyard, all 400 of them, In the early hours of the morning when the sky was just beginning to show the first hint of gray. He was not dramatic about it. He stood in front of them and told them the truth. About Grain's plan. About what would have happened to their territory. About the Lycan king's failures of attention toward the southern packs and his intention to correct that. About what came next for the Ashvale pack and why. He told them that the pack would be restructured under new leadership, a council of elected representatives rather than an inherited alpha position. He told them it would take time and that they would have support through the transition. He did not tell them about Imelda. He left that to her. She stepped forward when he was done. She watched the faces in the crowd. She watched recognition travel, slow, then fast, as people parsed the face they were seeing against the face they remembered. The Omega girl. The wolfless girl. The girl they had watched get escorted to the northern cliff. She let them look. She let them see what 3 years and a broken seal and a great deal of work could build out of a girl they had thrown away. She did not give a speech. She said one thing. "I did not come back for revenge," she said. "I came back because the people who hurt me do not get to define what I become. And because the ones who did not hurt me, the ones who were just following what they knew, you still deserve better than what you were given. So this is better. Take it." She stepped back. The silence in the courtyard was the particular quality of silence that carries weight. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the crowd, someone started to shift. Not as a threat, as an acknowledgement. It was an old tradition. When a pack recognizes someone they have wronged, the oldest form of visible apology was to show vulnerability. To be in the animal form, stripped of the human armor of words and expression and rationalization. One wolf shifted, then another, then a dozen, then hundreds. They were not her pack. She was not their alpha. This was not a formal ceremony of any kind. But it was real, and it was the only apology she would ever get from most of them. She breathed through it. She felt something release in her chest that she had not fully known she was holding. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. The weight that had lived in her since that night on the cliff. The weight of being thrown away, of being told you are worth nothing, of loving someone who confirmed it. She felt it, not disappear, but change. Go from something pressing down on her into something that had simply happened. Part of the landscape of who she was. Not a wound anymore. A scar. And scars, she had learned, are not weaknesses. They are evidence that the body healed. Corvus Hale stood his trial 3 months later. Not a Lycan court trial. There was no law that made what he had done formally criminal, because the law had been on his side when he made those decisions. The law was what needed to change, and Roderick had begun that work. But Corvus stood before the new Ashvale Council and told them what had happened. All of it. He told them what he had known, and what he had refused to acknowledge, and what he had done, and what he had not done. Imelda was not there for it. She did not need to be. She was in the north, in the stronghold, working on the petition framework for the Southern Pact's formal representation, the thing that Grain had wanted but had tried to take through the wrong means. She was doing it methodically, carefully, in consultation with pack representatives from across the South who had been waiting for exactly this kind of structured channel. It was not dramatic work. It was the kind of work that mattered most. Roderick was there most evenings. Not always. He had his own considerable responsibilities, and neither of them were the kind of people who needed constant proximity to feel connected. But most evenings, he would come to wherever she was working, and he would make tea without being asked because he had noticed early on that she lost track of eating and drinking when she was focused, and he would sit and read or work on his own things. And there would be the particular comfortable silence of two people who do not need to perform for each other. She looked up at him one evening. He was reading. The amber eyes were tracking the page steadily, the line of his jaw relaxed, his whole body carrying the specific kind of ease that people carry when they are exactly where they want to be. She had loved Corvus for 6 years without ever feeling this. That thought arrived quietly, without drama. She had loved Corvus like you love a place you have only ever seen in photographs, with devotion and imagination, and without actual knowledge of what the place smells like, sounds like, what it does to your body to be inside it. She had not known what real love felt like because she had never been in a space where it was safe enough to actually feel it. Roderick looked up from his book. He met her eyes. He did not ask what she was thinking. He just looked back at her the way the moon looks at the water, steady, without agenda, content to simply illuminate. "We should talk," she said. "Yes," he said. "We should." "About the bloodline pairing," she said. "About that," he agreed. "And about the rest of it." "The rest of it." She almost smiled. "You felt it too," she said. "The first day." "I felt it the first day," he confirmed. He closed his book and set it down. "I did not want to complicate the negotiation." "Neither did I." "We are remarkably similar people," he said, and there was something warm underneath the dry observation that she had learned to recognize as his particular way of expressing affection without making it awkward. "That could be a problem," she said. "Or a significant advantage," he said. She considered. He was not Corvus. He was not the warm, uncomplicated love of a 12-year-old girl who had not yet learned what safety cost. He was something more demanding than that, more real, with edges and history and all the complicated damage that adults accumulate from years of living. He was not perfect, and he had not always been wise, and the 11 years he had spent on his mountain had not been without consequence. But he was here. He was honest. He had given her room to be exactly who she was from the very first moment. And the thread that ran between them, the old bloodline recognition, the ancient pairing of king and vessel, was not a rope pulling her somewhere she did not want to go. It was more like the feeling of a frequency you had not known was missing from your hearing until it returned, and suddenly the music made more sense. She said, "Tell me about the 11 years." He looked at her. "That is a longer conversation than tonight," he said. "We have time," she said. He considered this for a moment. Then he said, "Yes, we do." He began to talk. She listened. Outside the stronghold windows, the northern sky was doing the thing it does at high altitude in the deep of the year. The stars were extreme and close, and the darkness between them was not empty but full, textured, alive. The fire between them was low and warm. She was not hiding. She was not performing. She was not making herself small or quiet or invisible. She was just there, exactly as she was, in a room with another person who was exactly as he was, and the sum of it was something she did not yet have the right word for. Something like beginning. Something like enough. In the spring, the Southern Pacts received their formal representation at the Lycan table. Grain's trial concluded with a sentence of 5 years of monitored exile and a prohibition on holding pack leadership positions. Not the brutal punishment some had wanted, but Roderick was not interested in brutality where accountability would serve better. Petra Voss came to live in the northern stronghold. She had a room with good light and a garden she immediately began to rebuild, and she and Ren Aldrich, who had known each other peripherally through Cepha's connection, discovered a mutual interest in the preservation of old bloodline records that kept them occupied and fiercely argumentative for hours at a time. Imelda found them bickering over a particularly contentious piece of text one afternoon and stood in the doorway listening to them, and felt something move through her that she could only describe as full. Not happy exactly. She was still, and would always be, someone who had fallen off a cliff and rebuilt herself from the dark. But full. Present. The Ashvale Pack reformed under its council structure. It was messy and slow and imperfect, the way all good things are messy and slow and imperfect. Corvus did not take a seat on the council. That had been part of his own choice, his own reckoning. He left the territory in the summer and went east. Imelda heard, through the network she still maintained, that he had taken a low-rank position in a small pack and was doing the work quietly, without visibility. She did not feel triumph about it. She did not feel anything much about it at all. She was too busy feeling things about the present to spend much energy on the past. On the night of the autumn equinox, in the northern forest, beneath a sky that was half stars and half wild northern light in greens and silver, Imelda Voss stood beside Roderick Vale, and they completed the bloodline pairing. Not with ceremony, not with witnesses, just the two of them in the forest, doing the old thing that their bloodlines had been designed to do together, the combining of powers that produced something greater than either alone. When it was done, the air smelled different. She could not explain how. It was still autumn air, still pine and cold, and the mineral tang of the north. But there was a depth to it that had not been there before. A completeness. Roderick stood beside her looking up at the lights shifting across the sky. "Well," he said. "Well," she agreed. He looked at her. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said. Then, after a moment, more accurately, "I am the best I have ever been." He nodded once. They stood in the forest for a long time without saying anything, both of them understanding that they had passed into something new and that new things require space before they need words. The northern lights moved above them, slow, enormous, unhurried. Everything that had happened to bring her here. The cold floor of the pack house. The years of invisible hands and invisible hopes. The boy who had chosen everything else. The cliff. The 300 feet of dark air. The warmth that had caught her at the bottom of the worst thing. The old woman's silver eyes. The years of work and the network and the slow building of a self-worth inhabiting. All of it had been a path. Not one she would have chosen. Not one she would wish on anyone. But hers. Entirely, completely, indelibly hers. And it had led her here. To this man. To this sky. To herself. She thought about the girl who had stood on the cliff and thought, in the last moment, I deserved better than all of this. She had been right. She just had not known yet what better looked like. Now she did. Better, it turned out, looked like this. A woman standing in a forest at night knowing exactly what she was. Knowing exactly what she was worth. Not because anyone had handed it to her, and not because revenge had made it sweet, but because she had gone into the darkest possible version of her story and chosen, with no guarantee of outcome, to keep going anyway. She had kept going. And the world, which owes no one anything, had met her halfway. She looked at Roderick. He looked at her. And whatever comes next, the council politics and the Southern petition revisions and Wren's ongoing arguments with her mother and all the ordinary, complicated, beautiful weight of a life lived in full, she was ready for it. All of it. There is a lesson buried in Imelda's story, and it is not the obvious one. It is not, believe in yourself. Everyone says that. It costs nothing to say and too much to do. It is not. Revenge is sweet. Imelda did not get her power from the desire to wound the people who wounded her. She got it from the decision not to let them be the last authors of her story. The lesson is simpler and harder than either of those. It is this. The people who throw you away are not always wrong about what you are. Sometimes they know exactly what you are. And it scares them. Not because you are weak. Because you are not. What you do with that fear, theirs, and the one they tried to plant in you, is the whole story. Imelda Voss was thrown off a cliff by people who feared what she carried. She landed. She rose. She did not come back to destroy them. She came back to show them what they had given away. And that difference, between destruction and demonstration, is the gap between bitterness and power. She chose power. She chose herself. Every single time, she chose herself. That is the story. That has always been the story. If Imelda's story stayed with you, If you felt her, if you ached with her, if you cheered for her even once, then you already know what kind of stories live on this channel. Stories about the ones who were thrown away and came back as the ones who could not be held down. Stories about the girls who loved too deeply and the girls who healed too quietly and the girls who became something the world had no word for until they named it themselves. We tell those stories here. Every single one. And we are just getting started. So if you have not already, hit that subscribe button right now. Not just to see what comes next, but because you deserve to be somewhere that tells you, the cliff is not the end. The fall is not the answer. The darkness that catches you is not the grave. It is the beginning. It has always been the beginning. Hit subscribe. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. And tell us, what was the moment in this story that broke you open? Was it the cliff? The shift in the forest? The moment she walked back into that courtyard and chose not to burn it down? Tell us. We want to know. Because this is not just a channel. It is a place where people who have fallen find the ones who rose. And that starts with you. Right here, right now. Subscribe. We will be here when you come back. We always are.